Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior corporate leader from the world of media, a very senior leader from the world of philanthropy, from London, UK, Mr. Peter Phippen. Peter, welcome to
Hi,
the show.
Ashutosh. Thank you for having me. It's really
Thank
nice
you.
to be here.
Thank you. Peter is the former managing director of BBC Magazines and the main board director of BBC Worldwide Limited, now BBC Studios. He's the chair of NHS Charities. Together, he's the chair of the Chiltern Society, and he's also the chairman of the Hedgerley HS and JHGS. So, Peter, we're going to talk a little bit about the work you've done at BBC and the charities. But before that, a few questions for you. You've had a fascinating career spanning media, education, and philanthropy. What were some of the key milestones in your journey?
Two, really. I mean, one was just a stroke of luck. When I left university, I got the job of trainee at a magazine company called IPC Magazines.
Hmm.
It doesn't go by that name any longer. Um, and that I hadn't particularly set out for that. That was a job I got. And it allowed me to combine two completely different sides to my character, one creative and one commercial. And I was so lucky. The next 30 odd years that I spent in the media industry, I absolutely loved every minute.
Hmm.
And that was a stroke of luck. Um, our, I led the sale of BBC magazines many years later.
Yeah.
And following the sale, I was offered the role of vice chairman, and that was a part-time role.
Hmm.
And I thought, shall I try and get another role in corporate life, or shall I go plural, as they say, do a number of things simultaneously?
Hmm.
I wanted the opportunity to do a number of things, to go into the worlds of certainly commercial work still, but also charity, government, perhaps start my own business. And that was fantastic. And that was about 15 years ago now.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I wish I had done some of the things I've done in the last 15 years
Hmm.
right at the start of my career.
Hmm.
I know you yourself have been both a corporate executive
Yeah.
and you've started your own businesses and run your own
Hmm.
businesses.
Hmm.
And I think you will probably agree with me that
Completely.
actually, most people who work in corporate life should ideally have had some experience of running either a very small operation or running their own business. You
Hmm.
learn so much from that. And I
Absolutely.
wish I had. So if I could have turned my career sort of completely upside down, that might have been really good.
Absolutely right. You refer to your post-executive path as a plural career. And I'd love to understand what was the inspiration, because I've often said from the corporate world, when people superannuate, they don't plan what to do next. And you
Uh,
seem to have done that very, very well.
well, I did. I did think about it very hard 15 years ago. Do I try and get another role leading a media company
Mm.
similar to what I had been doing? Um, Actually, I wanted to do a number of different things. I wanted
Mm.
to try and start my own business. I wanted to work in some smaller media companies, ideally in a chair role. I wanted some experience of working with government, some experience in charity. Um, Above all else, I wanted to enjoy everything I did
Mm.
and to work with people that I wanted to work with,
Mm.
and to have that feeling of freedom.
Yeah.
Um, and I was lucky enough to be able to do that. I don't know, I probably had about 20 odd different jobs in the last 15 years, some of them,
Mm,
a lot of them
mm, mm.
simultaneous.
Yeah,
And it's been fantastic.
I know. I can imagine. I can imagine. But Peter, you've also held leadership positions across the UK, USA, India, and Australia. How did working in such diverse environments influence your leadership style?
It's hard to say. I actually, I don't know that it has too much because I try to be myself in whatever setting.
Mm.
So I'm sorry to say that when working in the US, in India, and in Australia, people have had to put up with a Brit because that's my background, and
Okay.
that's who I am. I try not to pretend to be different characters for
Mm,
different settings. Um, but I try to get on with uh, people. I try to bring people together around common goals, and I try to learn from people. And in this context, I've been trying to learn from different cultures and
mm.
what they bring. And so, if that's a part of my leadership style, then
Fascinating.
that's the answer to your question.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Let's now talk about your first innings with the BBC. Um, During your time at the BBC, how did you balance public service broadcasting with commercial strategy?
I tried to ensure that one complemented the other.
Hmm.
Um, and that the brand, in my view, should be consistent throughout. It's absolutely critical.
Mm,
The sources of revenue may be different,
mm,
but the brand must be consistent. Um, it was my belief that the reach of the BBC
mm,
could be extended
mm.
through commercial activity,
Right.
both in the UK and outside the UK. So I tried to do that, but never undermining the core values of the
Mm,
BBC.
mm. Amazing. Because you were the former managing director of BBC Magazines and a main board director of BBC Worldwide. What were some of the principles that guided BBC's international licensing strategy under your leadership?
Well, as I say, it was to ensure that the brand values were taken into other parts of the world,
Mm,
or as far as the magazines were concerned, in the UK as well,
mm,
and that people were getting access
mm,
to what the BBC stood for within
mm,
a different setting, and that they were uh, paying for it um, in an entirely different way, but that they felt that they were getting all of the brand values of the BBC
mm,
within that context.
mm, mm. Well said. From I think you and I are probably the same vintage, from a position where we would be reading a broadsheet newspaper and listening to television to today where everything is on your handheld device. I want to get your perspective on how should broadcasters think about youth engagement in an age of short form and social driven content.
Obviously, all media companies now need to reach audiences where they are.
Hmm.
And if that's on the phone, if that is within social media, they've got to be there. But I do think that as a media owner, media company, you
Hmm.
have a responsibility to ensure that you don't dumb down, that you try to stay true to the things that you stand for.
Hmm.
If your content is not distinguishable from UGC,
Hmm.
then you have no reason to exist.
Right.
It has it has to be distinguishable either through its quality or the quality of its research, its sourcing, its accuracy, whatever it is, whatever you stand for,
Mm.
that's still got to exist. Um, let me give you a rather silly example.
Hmm.
I'm a football fan,
Okay.
and like all football fans, I endlessly go online to see the latest news about transfers or whatever
Mm.
it is. 95, I mean, every football fan will tell you this,
Yeah.
95% of what you find online is rubbish.
Yes.
It is clickbait, it's recycling stuff. There's nothing new to say. If they do try to say something new,
Mm.
you can't believe it. That's 95% of it. There are a few journalists out there. I could name them, but I won't. There are a few journalists out there
Mm.
who you know will have sourced their information accurately. It's
Mm.
really good.
Mm.
You can rely on it. And they've got to that position
Mm.
of trust um, because of enormous hard work um, and staying true to their principles.
Yeah.
Um, it takes a lot of patience and a lot of self-discipline to do
Mm.
that.
Mm.
But a few people do it. Um, I'm sorry to say that some media companies
Mm.
have gone down the kind of
Correct.
clickbait rubbish route. Those that employ journalists who are of the top quality,
Mm.
whatever the context, and
Yeah.
you're searching for this content online,
Mm.
then those that reflects on the corporate brand as well as the brand of the
Yeah.
journalist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. You, a few minutes back, you also spoke about the importance of the BBC brand. I'd love to get your thoughts on BBC's global brand and its evolution in today's very highly fragmented media ecosystem.
Um, you're right. I mean, the market has changed um, uh, beyond recognition in the
Yep.
last 30 or 40 years,
Mm.
um, and not always for the better.
Mm.
Um, within that fragmented marketplace, I think people are looking more than ever for trusted sources of information.
Yep.
It isn't that a plethora of voices gives you um, independence by itself. Um, uh, you can't just add up all of the different perspectives and assume that they add up to
Mm.
a collective picture that can be trusted.
Mm.
It doesn't quite work like that, especially when too many people get used to just an echo chamber of their own views.
Mm.
Um, I think it is important and desirable, and I think most people want
Mm.
an opportunity to search for a trusted voice,
Yep.
and within that range of opportunities, I
Mhm.
think the BBC brand still stands
Absolutely.
for a lot of people as a uh, doesn't always get it right, but is more often accurate than
Correct.
some of the authors.
Correct. But Peter, there are not too many major public broadcasters left in the world like the BBC. And yet, a lot of countries, a lot of people do want to talk of building an institution like the BBC. My question is, what advice would you give to public broadcasters today who are under increasing political and financial scrutiny and pressure?
Ashutosh, that is so difficult because the BBC in the UK is in a almost unique and very lucky position
Absolutely.
still
Yes. Yes.
of being funded by a compulsory license fee um, uh, is therefore quite well funded,
Yep.
um, and will be so for
Mm.
as long as it maintains the support and trust of people in Britain.
Mm.
If you don't have those sources of funding,
Mm.
and or you are under extreme pressure from the government of the day to conform to their will, then I honestly don't know what the answer to your
Yeah.
question is, what you do
Mm.
about it,
Mm.
other than you have to do your very best to stay true to your principles.
Mm.
Once you have uh, responded to that pressure, there is no way back.
Mm.
Um, if you stay true to a position of
Mm.
independence and you try to
Mm.
convince people that funding is desirable,
Mm.
then um, maybe there is some way back.
Very well
But
said.
but in truth,
Yep.
the BBC in the UK is arguably an anachronism.
Mm.
It isn't something that you would invent today.
Yep.
Uh, it was invented in the 1920s.
Mm.
Um, but many institutions
Yep.
that you wouldn't invent today,
Mm.
you nonetheless wish to maintain
Correct.
because they are a happy accident.
Absolutely right.
And in my view, it is you look at the position in many other countries
Mm.
where there is no truly, or there are very few truly independent
Yep.
voices, and that broadcasters in particular have had to go down the route of either appealing to a right-wing audience or appealing to a left-wing audience,
Mm.
appealing to the supporters of one political party or to another political party.
Mm.
Um, and I think those countries, in terms of their democracy, are missing something.
Mm.
And so, um, as you can tell,
Yep.
I'm still a believer in what the BBC stands for.
Absolutely. No, I'm with you completely. But let's now move to this your second innings, which is from the world of charities and philanthropy. And my first question is, what drew you to the charity sector after such a successful career in media?
The same things, the same things. You feeling of wanting to do something interesting, wanting to do something challenging,
Mm.
wanting to make a difference, have some impact,
Mm.
um, being ambitious to change things and do
Mhm.
things. So the same motivations is just those motivations applied in a different context.
Right, right. Well said. My next question is that there are these large philanthropic efforts going on in different parts of the world, and yet there are often questions asked around the world. How can leadership ensure transparency, accountability, and public trust when it comes to very large philanthropic projects?
It's absolutely crucial. It is the fundamental requirement.
Mm.
If you are asking people out of the
Mm.
goodness of their hearts to give money in a particular cause to
Mm.
achieve something,
Mm.
and most people have a desire to do that.
Mm.
Most people want to solve problems.
Yeah.
If they're told about a problem and they believe that they can help to make a difference,
Mm.
they want to get involved.
Mm.
Um, and if you are an intermediary in that process, trying to gather support, gather money
mm,
to make a difference. Um, it is absolutely critical that those who have supported you have absolute trust in you.
mm,
So, above everything else, the leadership in a philanthropic
mm,
enterprise
mm,
have a responsibility to ensure that money is well used,
mm,
is absolutely not misused,
mm.
and that you are able to tell people what they have achieved through their
Right,
support.
right. Amazing. How can charities ensure that they remain relevant in a world of donor fatigue and competing causes?
Um, well, you're right. There are so many things that people can get behind. Um, you have to describe what the problem is. You have to um, ex appeal to people's desire to help, um, people's emotional reaction. Um, and people do that.
Mm,
They see a famine in a far off land,
mm,
um, or they respond to a crisis in a local hospital, um, or they watch their own loved one suffer in some way, and they don't want to see others suffer in the same way.
mm.
And uh, you have to engage
Yeah,
people's
yeah,
emotions,
yeah.
and as I say, people do respond. Um, the vast majority of people
Mm,
want to help, and want to know how they can help,
mm.
and they want to believe that by helping you, they can make a real
Yeah.
difference and they can have an impact.
Mm. I have time for two more questions for you, Peter. As someone who's worked in both global and local nonprofits, how do you measure success differently across them?
I don't think you do really. I think the critical thing in a charity, just as it is in a commercial enterprise,
Hmm.
is that you are absolutely crystal clear about what your objectives are,
Right.
and what will have an impact, and that you focus on the things that will be most important and have the greatest impact.
Mm,
There can be a temptation in a charity
mm,
because a lot of good and nice people work in charities. There can be a temptation to try to do everything
mm,
and try to do and to be happy that you're doing something that's good.
mm,
The important thing is it the most good
mm.
that you can do
Yeah.
with the resources that you have?
Mm,
I think that applies to a very big global charity. It applies to a tiny one-person charity in a particular town. Um, it is you have some resources. Don't waste your resources.
mm,
Focus them, and focus on what impact you can make.
mm. Fascinating. And my last question for you, Peter. How, in your opinion, should charities adapt to emerging challenges like climate change, digital transformation, and social inequality, among so many other challenges?
Um, well, the digital transformation is both a challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity.
Mm,
And if charities like commercial organizations
mm,
don't make use of the technologies available to them, then they will become very old-fashioned and they will have less success.
yeah.
Um, climate change is a challenge for all of us.
Mm.
I mean, one of the charities I'm concerned with, the Children's Society, in just one little region of England, that is, it's an important
Yeah.
aspect of the change that we have to combat.
Mm.
So, some of these things are opportunities.
Yeah.
Some of them are challenges for all of us,
Mm.
and we all have a responsibility to
Mm.
try to meet those challenges
Mm.
and to place pressure on big companies, on governments,
Yeah.
to try to make a difference that
Mm.
will, because our children and our grandchildren are going to either reap the benefits or suffer the consequences of
Correct.
the things that we do
Correct.
today.
Correct. Well said. But on that note, Peter, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been with you. We started talking about your plural career, which is such a powerful set of two words. And you really epitomize how you've done so many different things from the BBC to so many different charities and philanthropy. Thank you for speaking to me about the BBC, which is quite an amazing institution in the world. Thank you also for speaking to me about some of the charities that you work with and support so much. Thank you again, and
Thank
good
you.
luck to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.